Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I had the pleasure of talking with Marc Burckhardt, who was the accelerant on the very hot edition of Suntups the Magus. And now Marc has quite the resume. His work has been commissioned by Porsche, Gucci, the Rolling Stones, Time Magazine. In 2011, he was even commissioned to do the portraits for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. How cool is that? His works won multiple awards, but the one I find the most interesting is a Grammy. He won a Grammy. This is an artist who won a Grammy. Do you know what that takes? It's not easy. He won a Grammy for the best limited edition box set packaging for the legend Johnny Cash. That's pretty awesome. But most of all, the guy's a human being who's an incredible artist, a former instructor, art instructor, and we talk about many, many things, including his work for Suntup, of course, his position as an artist interpreting or giving vision to an author's work, how he feels about that balance. And we even talk about AI and the intrusion of AI into the creative space, what that means. And I think you should all be terrified. But you'll hear it from the man himself. He's a brilliant guy, extremely talented artist, and very gracious enough to give an hour of his life to inform all of us about what it is and what his approach to art and creating these incredible pieces. I hope you'll consider getting the Magus. I'll put links to his Instagram account in the description, as well as his website, where you can see all of his work. It's great stuff. And I hope you enjoy this interview. Pour something tasty and get comfortable.
For once, I'm not talking to myself. It's time to go beyond the book and get over your shelf.
Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about the Magus. I'm always fascinated by the artists who bring these books to life, because I used to be a purist, right? If you write a book, I want the words, I want the connection to the author. I don't want somebody tinkering with the images in my mind. But I discovered early on when I read some Dark Tower books by Stephen King and Michael Whalen did the art for that, how exceptional it can be if there are highlighted moments, if there are key emotions that are ramped up by really incredible art that matches the tone of the story. So I've totally converted my way of thinking, and trust me, that was in my 20s,
Right.
So that was a while ago. So I'm always fascinated to talk to the people who create these things and find out about your process. I'm a verbal communicator. I know I'm stumbling around, so it's probably not so easy to tell, but I'm about the written word. So I'm always fascinated by visual thinkers. And so I guess that's where I'd like to start with you. When you how would you describe your work? How do you, to a noob like me? So for example, I don't know like what style you would call your work, and how you would classify that and how you would describe it.
Well, I would say, so I often hear and I understand the reasons why people would look at my work and think of surrealism, for example, because there is maybe a sort of a dreamlike component to it, and I use a lot of symbolism. But I don't see my work as surrealist in any way. It's in that I'm a storyteller. And so I use characters and images, and particularly draw from, so I art history background. I draw from, in particular, Flemish painting, because to me, it's the beginning of our modern visual language. It's sort of like the Latin of our culture's visual language. It's the beginning, it's the end of the church commissioning work. It's the beginning of secular commissioned work, and all the symbolism and meaning that comes from that. And it was steeped in symbolism, almost like a rebus. So it was sort of visual, very visual symbols that together could be read almost like a sentence, a picture. So a painting of a vase was not a painting of a vase. It's about mortality and all these. That's the kind of work that interested me. My background was art history, as well as painting and printmaking. So I sort of see my work that way. And I also sort of connecting to your statement about visual or about verbal thinking. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that when you're making pictures for words, or for example, I've done a lot of music related work, you're responding to another art form, and you have to be respectful to that art form, and to the person who's interacting with both those things together. I'm very hesitant, for example, to show a main character in a novel. I mean, the character may be very accurately or very specifically described in a book, but still, I think everybody carries a different image in their head, and that's part of the joy of reading. And so I don't want to step on that.
That's interesting. Yeah, but I think, you're right. If somebody like, for example, The Dark Tower with Michael Whelan, Stephen King's very clear about who Roland is and what he looks like.
Right.
He's pretty much Clint Eastwood. So I think when Michael Whelan brought him to life visually, it was pretty much the same image we had in our brains anyway. But I do love that, because I couldn't quite place it when I looked at your work on your site. And I would never, I see why people would say surreal, but I didn't get that. For example, your print Homecoming, I loved it. It's a tiger, right? A tiger with a rabbit in his mouth.
Yeah.
But the rabbit doesn't look dead. He looks like he's hugging, So there's a whole lot going on there. Is the rabbit satisfied that he sacrificed his life for the tiger? Are they friends? Is this how the tiger carries the rabbit? Like, there's so much you can, as a viewer, sort of emote from that image. So surreal is, I guess, all storytelling.
I would actually, and I often do this when people, I think it's natural, it's understandable, and it's a compliment that people are interested in the work, but I will often get people that will ask me, what is this painting about? And the comparison I always make is one to literature, and I say, you can read a book, you can read a novel, and you can read it at its surface level, its characters and the actions and what happens, the arc of the story, where it begins, where it ends. And you can read it at that level and dig no deeper than that, and you have a satisfying experience. But then there are layers of meaning underneath any good novel, and levels of complexity in which you can begin to understand it. But I personally would find it very dissatisfying if the author stepped out of the book and said, no, it means this, and that person symbolizes that, and if you read it any other way, you've missed the point, right? I think it would be taking away. I believe that almost any kind of art form only comes alive when it's interacted with by the person who is experiencing it. And so I try to treat my paintings that same way. I have a very specific idea of the stories that I'm telling, but I won't talk about the meaning of those with other people, because I think it's like, well, there are cultures where they, you're not allowed to photograph someone because you're stealing their soul. And I kind of feel like you do that a little bit with a piece of art or writing, if you tell somebody a very specific way to interpret it. You've stolen the soul from that object. So I think that kind of open-endedness is important, because it allows you to have a conversation with a piece of music or a writing or art, visual art.
I'm nodding my head like crazy over here, because yes, that is, I get so frustrated as a reader, or any art I appreciate, when somebody demands the author or the artist explain their work. Like they're upset. For example, there's a book by Paul Tremblay. I don't know if you've ever read anything by him. And it's he has these books, I guess there are 3 of them, that have very ambiguous endings. And I love that. I love it. There's a book, Cabin at the End of the World, where the ending is just there, and the reader carries it off on the evidence that the author gave in the book throughout. What do they want that ending to be? Or what do they feel like they were being led to believe? What feels real to them? And there are people that are like, I love the book all the way to the ending. Like they wanted it clearly defined. And that kind of makes me sad, because this is a partnership. This is a contract I've entered into with a creator.
Right. Exactly.
I'll bring my brain, and you've brought this, and in exchange, we both take something.
Right. Yeah. I think that's like, as I say, it's kind of you're like a magician. As in any creative role, you're a magician. I think you know certain tricks or techniques through writing, and maybe they're ideally they're ones that you've learned yourself. There's a craft, and then you make that craft your own, and use that craft in order to briefly take someone out of the world that they're in and take them into your world. And I think that's an important thing to be aware of, and also, as I said, respect the fact that the magic doesn't happen until the other person is swept away by it, right? So It's not just your actions, in an empty room that that's maybe where you practice, or even where you, in my case, where I create, in this space, for example, but the art doesn't come alive until it's out there and someone's responding to it. And that's the process where I think my job is to get out of the way. My job is already done.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard other authors and artists say that as well, that once it's out there in the world, it belongs to everybody else.
Yep.
And however it behaves and however it interacts with the public is now it's its own entity, and you can't put that genie back in. Yeah. So how do you
go ahead?
How do you create your work then? So what are your media?
I do a sort of a modified version of an old master's technique. Again, my art history background, my love of, in particular, sort of Flemish painting. I like the making of things. It's very important to me have a physical object at the end of that process, and the actual getting lost in the making of something is very important to me. So the old masters, particularly of that era, was the beginning of oil painting and the discovery of oil as a medium for painting. And it's got a subtlety to it that other kinds of paint don't have. So before oil painting was really, tempera painting was the primary, which is an egg binder. So it was a very fast drying medium. It was very opaque, and suddenly oils came along. There was more transparency, and it dries very slowly. So there's a subtlety to blending and colors that can be created. So rather than the old masters would use tempera to build up a painting monochromatically, and then come in with oil in glazes over the top, almost like if you can imagine a piece of red glass laid on top of a picture. Suddenly the picture is red, but all the different colors that come through that give some variety.
Yeah.
And so I use, instead of tempera, I use acrylic, which has many of the same properties. Fast drying, it's opaque. I build things up monochromatically. On my Instagram, there are videos. There's sort of sped up videos where you can see the initial process when I lay down a drawing and I work very thinly, building up just in tones of burnt umber and white and black. Build up a painting that way, and then apply oil. And it's usually on wood, sometimes on paper, but mostly on wood.
I'll have to put a link to your Instagram then in the description of this video, because I would be, and I know a lot of people are intensely interested in that process. So if you have stuff like that, that's really cool. So do you sketch first? I mean, like, how do you shape the idea?
Well, I have some little sketchbooks, a few on my table, and I'm always, it's very non-chronological. I have sketchbooks that I did sketches 5 years ago, and then I left that book somewhere and I picked up a new one. And so but I've got these books, and I always tell people my sketchbooks are not beautiful things. They're like a writer's shorthand.
Yeah.
I'm doing just, the idea is to put down ideas.
Yeah.
In order to be able to move to the next idea, I have to just say, okay, I thought maybe this would be a nice solution. I put it down, and then I can move on to the next. And I try to come up with various solutions for something and then decide which one works the best, work through compositions. And then and in a case like this, so I do a lot of gallery work as well. But if I do commissioned work, then I show a sketch to the client of what I work through a lot of thumbnails and a lot of ugly little undecipherable things, and then present something that's more organized and worked out compositionally and everything, a version of the idea that I think works best. They see that there's an approval process. Usually I try not to have changes. I mean, sometimes there's some feedback, but generally speaking, I try to really be thorough in thinking things through and reasoning it. And when I send a sketch to a client, I'll also write something that talks about my thinking process and helps them to understand. Because I tend to think that my work is, while somewhat narrative, not hit you over the head narrative. So it's not an exact reflection of a scene necessarily. So I think that helps. And then once that process is through, then I go straight to painting. And the painting I'll use also traditional methods of transferring my drawings. My drawings, as I say, when I send them, are well worked out compositionally then, as well as conceptually. So then I'm able to use that almost like a roadmap, but just like a roadmap. There's what you see on the map, and then there's what you see while you're driving down the road.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the driving down the road that's the fun part.
Yeah.
It's not just the destination, it's the journey. Particularly, I think, as a creative person, right, it's the journey. So for me, there's a lot of creativity that happens in the process of painting. And my sketches, while very clear, are never color. So I make those decisions and sort of intuitively, I guess. And it's not as if they're necessarily surprises, but
right.
Maybe some kind of blue. We'll work in a somewhat traditional way in that sense, but I leave enough things open to make it fun for me.
So do you ever have your roadmap, and then as you're going down the road and you're creating that piece, do you ever just take a completely different turn? Like, I did not even realize this was going to be where I went.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's like I say, it's a little bit more difficult when you're in a commissioned situation, because people,
sure, yeah, they have expectations.
In this case, obviously not, but there are, I've done many works for books where the author is a living author who may be part of that process of seeing what I'm doing before it's done. And that's always for me a very, I always say, I would never dare to tell the author, that, you should maybe change something. So I want that process to be respected on this side as well.
Right.
But I also understand the value of people understanding where things are going and not being completely blindsided in the process. So I try to be very clear in what I'm going to do. But then if I take another direction, I communicate that to people, and I communicate the reasons why, so that everyone understands that process. So it's collaborative in that sense, but it's not really. I think art is by its very nature, anything good is not really a collaborative process.
Not at all. No, not at all. When I was a creative at marketing agency, and we worked primarily with higher ed institutions. And
Right.
I probably should say this into a microphone, but I'd always approach the client work like, first they'll get my best.
Right.
After that, they'll get the rest. Like, if you're building or creating anything out of consensus, it will be so watered down that if you want to please everyone, you will please no one. And
Exactly.
And so I agree. And I think you also don't want the author to badmouth the work,
Right.
You don't want them to go around saying, yeah, the book is great, but whoever the publisher hired for the art is
Right. Yeah, I think it's not even so much that concerns me, as I of course want the person who was by all rights the inspiration
Right.
for creating a piece of art to feel good about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
At
You
the
want to
same
win
time,
them over. Yeah.
I want to win them over, but I also don't want, as I say, I would hope it's not always the case, but one hopes that they respect that you're an artist in your own right,
Yeah.
and that space is a valuable space, and I think that's something that I would say probably any writer would say the same thing, that you learn over the course of your career. I've been lucky. I've done this my entire adult life. This is what I do. So you learn along the way, not just how to become a better artist in terms of craft and concept, but also you learn how to communicate your ideas to people so that they understand where you're going. And most importantly, you learn when to say no to a project, or to sort of recognize when when someone comes to you with a project, to ask the right questions to find out whether the collaborative, sort of not really collaborative process is going to work the way it should. Because I turn down probably at least as much as I accept.
Really?
Yeah, I just don't. I think I'm in a fortunate position after many years of doing this that I can be a lot more selective. I think this is also something that writers would relate to. Writing it's rarely a commissioned process, but still, a writer may have a contract with a publisher to produce X number of books, right? But that's generally the parameter. The publisher's not telling them what to do, and there's an editing feedback process. All of those things happen, but it's the author's job to determine what the direction is. And part of the reason why you get that contract is because you've established a voice.
Yeah. Right.
And I think at this point in my career, I've been around a long enough time, and I've also not built any firewall between commissioned work and non-commissioned work. I believe it's all the same voice.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, and because of that, I think people come to me knowing what I do.
Yeah.
And they get out of my way and let me do that. And I think that's something that's maybe at 20 not so easy to do as an artist. But
right. You have to establish.
Well, it's not just that you have to establish it for other people, but much more importantly, I think you have to establish your voice for yourself. And again, I think any writer would say the same thing. That's something that you're not born fully formed from the forehead of Zeus. It takes, a lifetime of doing something to understand what you're doing.
What would be a project you'd be like, do you guys even know who I am? Like, what project would you just turn down? I mean, you don't have to name a name, but
I couldn't even think of a specific name, but I mean, I have projects that actually fewer and fewer projects that I turn down at this point, probably a lot of projects simply because of timing, just because I have commitments to this, and the other, and I really have to, I try to leave some space always for something amazing that might, that's just like, I can't possibly, say no to this. But generally speaking, just things where I recognize, I just actually completed a project for a client. I won't say who it is, but a client that I've worked with for many years, and it was a wonderful project. But I turned them down the first 3 times they asked me, and because it was just they were describing sort of what they were looking for and the time frame, and I just said I can think of some great artists, and I gave them some names of some other people and said I would really go to them. This is not me. And then they came back and said, well, what would you do? And so it was as I say, that I think that's part of what you learn too, is to sort of know what you do well, and what is not your comfort zone, because that's, I think, a bad place to be as an artist.
Yeah.
But know where your discomfort zone is, maybe.
Right.
And so to be able to communicate that in an honest way with people, and know that you're going to be able to give them 110% is the best place to be. And so that sometimes means saying no, or just sort of saying, I spend part of my time in Germany. So ja is yes and nein is no. And there's a term in German called jein, which is sort of like in the middle. And I think sometimes you have to say jein.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I'll have to remember that. Yeah. So how did you feel when Suntup approached you to do this? Did you know about Suntup?
I did not know about Suntup. I've done some other, books with presses that are similar. I'm actually in the midst of working on Purgatory, the second. I did Dante's Inferno a few years ago, and
Yeah, I saw that.
For another publisher, and so I was intrigued. I was not aware of Suntup, but in the process, looking at their books, I was like, yes, these guys get it. They understand this how to bring these things together and respect the literature and respect the art and do really beautiful work. And so it felt right away like something that was going to be a good fit.
Were you familiar with the book?
I was not familiar with the book, and for me that was also part of the process, and that's the part of the joy of doing this kind of project too, is that it's there is a little bit of time in which to really absorb the work. And so, and they were, they're generous enough, and I think wise enough to give the artists an opportunity to really, if they're not familiar with the material, to familiarize themselves with the material before you commit. And for me, this book was just a really good fit in terms of the kinds of, I love tarot imagery, and for example, and so there were a lot of things that I immediately, just in reading it, I could visualize. And there's certain literature, I think, that really makes pictures, at least for me, brings pictures to my mind, and this was certainly.
And that goes back to what you said earlier about not making something that not spoils, but sort of steers the reader too much, because I have not yet read the book. I've read his other book, The Collector, absolutely loved it. And when I was looking at the art, it didn't reveal anything to me. I obviously, I didn't feel like it was anything like a spoiler, but it did create a tone. It did set a tone, and it was very evocative. And when I read the plot synopsis of the book, I'm like, oh, I can see how this comes together. And so in a lot of ways, I think that heightens the experience of reading.
I hope so. I think part of an artist's job is to like the magician, or like a theater designer. You create a space in which to pull someone into a different world, and you have to understand what that world is that you're trying to pull them into too. And I think this novel has a very, when you read it, you will feel there's a very unique voice, and it felt almost like I paint pictures, I don't write, and maybe not eloquent, but I think there's almost a hypnotic quality when reading this book. It does feel a little bit like you're under a magic spell.
Wow.
In reading it, from the beginning, you kind of get pulled into like a dream, in a way, or I felt that way. In the setting, without getting too much away, is remote, and you feel the layers of the onion peeled back, and you're brought to a place that there's a very unique feeling to it. And I wanted to reflect that in the artwork, to sort of use some of the larger symbolism as a framework. So again, the cards as a sort of a method of tying these very disparate images together, but then making each one of those images like a tarot card, something that you have to read into and reflect what you've read in these symbols and images.
Yeah, I mean, by their very nature, tarot cards are about interpretation and about understanding the signs around you. And
Exactly.
yeah, and I'm very excited for this book. How did you pick which parts to illustrate? Was it just something that struck you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I really, I mean, sometimes, it's a difficult thing to do for books where you're creating images that are not just for the cover, but that are sort of, for lack of a better way to describe it, littered throughout the book, that are in different parts of the book than you, because often there are sections where you'll read a chapter and there's 10 images that you can think of, and then there's some other section where the character may be lost in a very internal debate in which it's not so visual, right? But in this, I was fortunate in this case that this book has so many. It was places where there were strong images, that it was more a process of sort of weeding out things, and narrowing it down to the images that I would create.
Did you give them a bunch of things? Like, was there a back and forth in like, hey, I really want to illustrate this part, or did you have just absolute freedom and they're like, yeah, go for it?
I was fortunate with them, and like I say, it's not always the case, and I think I try to be a pretty easygoing person to work with, but I also think I know what I'm doing, and know what I can bring to a project. And so in this case, I typically will not send 5 sketches for one image. I will send one sketch for one image. And if there's some, real difference of opinion about that, then that's something that could be discussed. But in this case, I mean, I think they were also really terrific and understood what I do and came to me with that. And so I gave them sketches that showed them where I was going and what I was doing, but it was really a very respectful approach on their end. So there wasn't a back and forth about those images.
How long ago, how long have you been keeping the secret of the Magus?
It's been, I think it was early last year, or that they approached me, and or maybe a little bit longer ago than that, because it took a couple of months before I could begin on the project. Just had other projects going on, but then I probably completed. I completed it within this last year, and then that's the hard part. There are projects sometimes that you have to sit on for a long time. It's like, very excited to show the world what you've done, but you can't because,
Did they say why they picked you? Did Rebecca just reach out to you and say, we want you for this project, or were you recommended? Like, how did that happen?
I think Paul initially approached me, and I don't really recall if there were specific images that they mentioned, but it's typically the case with me that if someone doesn't come to me, and if they come to me and say, we love your work and we were thinking about this, then one of the questions that I think you learn to ask in that process is, are there particular images of mine that you like, or were there certain things that you associated with this? You have to ask the kinds of questions that get you to know whether you are in fact the right person. For example, a homecoming piece, maybe someone looks and just says, "Oh, he can paint a tiger," and right, it's like, well, that's not why you want to work with me.
No.
Tiger was in my image is not, I'm not the tiger guy. It's about it's about the stories that you tell, and so I think you have to ask those questions. But with them, so I don't recall exactly what the conversation was, but they were familiar with my work, and in the course of that initial correspondence with them, was able to figure out that it wasn't just one piece that they were responding to, but they had a real understanding of what I do and what I bring to the process. And so that immediately puts you in a more comfortable and confident position in working with somebody when you know that they understand what you bring.
I do mourn. I do pity, mourn, whatever the word is, for people who don't have a sense of humor, or also see a picture like that and think, oh, that's a nice tiger, or that looks realistic, or not realistic enough, or something that's so surface level. Because the three pieces, when I went on your gallery page, when I saw the Homecoming, and Still Life,
Yeah.
and then the, I don't know the name, I don't remember the name, with the skull, the bird's nest in the eye, and just this balance. I love those three, because I think that's what art should do. It should spark something. You're handing it over. You've created this spark, and you're like, here, carry this off and make a fire with it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what, yeah.
I think that's a beautifully put. That is what I think you should be doing with any kind of art form. And so, yeah, thank you.
So how do you teach this? You're an instructor. How I'm always fascinated by that, because like I said, I worked with higher ed institutions, and I'd see, like University of Texas Arlington had you could get a degree in glass blowing, and all these art schools, and I'm like, how I could see going deep in it, I could see immersing, but I'm always fascinated by, how do you teach that? Because somebody has to bring the talent. You can't teach that.
Well, it's actually at this point, it's been about 10 years since I taught. When I taught, I was teaching. I would tell my students this too. I would say, this is my volunteer work. I'm losing money coming here to teach you. One night a week, and it was always an intense course. And I say, I take time from my studio to do this. So be here, be present in your mind, or maybe there's another version of this class that you could take, because I wanted very focused students. And I think there is a lot of discipline that's required to make a living doing something, and doing it honestly and with integrity. So there's running a business, there's explaining your ideas, and then there's, most importantly, finding your own voice and making sure it doesn't get stepped on, right? And that, right? And so all of those things are skills that are very hard to teach, but they're also critical. And art schools, I have to be honest, do a particularly terrible job at some aspects of that.
I'm sure.
The giving artists the practical tools to understand how to get up every day and do this, right, is important. So I think also, if you've taught, if you learn as much or probably more than the students do, because it's a lot of what you're doing is intuitive. It's a process that you've been doing, and you're distilling your knowledge. It's coming to you each and every day and growing. And so you've got this forest on your hands, and you're trying to teach somebody how to plant a seed. But it makes you articulate things that you take for granted. And so in that process, you learn a tremendous amount. And I think that's really what it is sort of giving, for me at least, as a teacher, it was giving small, relatively bite-sized problems to artists, usually written form, and saying, okay, now you've got something that's the written word. And I don't like to use the word illustration, because I think most people, when they hear the word illustration, they think of like something in a dictionary. And I don't think that's what an artist should do.
Right. I have a hard time with that word too, because I want to say, like, how did you paint this book? Well, the person doesn't paint, they're a digital artist. Or how did you, and when I say illustrate, it's sort of like, I'm thinking of a court artist, a court sketch artist. Like, you're documenting a scene. You're not.
It's almost, I would say it's the difference between, reading an article in a newspaper about something that happened versus reading a novel. Yes, they're both written forms, but one is just stating facts and putting information together in a very specific way, and the other is an art. Right. And so I think what I do, or at least what I want to do, there are people who do beautiful work that is, by all definitions, illustration. It is
correct, right?
Someone who does a map but can do it beautifully and with character and fun, and I love that kind of work, but that's not what I do. So what I try to do is with students is give them, something written, some kind of problem. Maybe even it's, I've given, for example, fortune cookies. So bring fortune cookies in the room, throw them out, open it up, whatever is inside the fortune cookie, make meaning from it.
That's
But
your prompt, yeah.
yeah, but the idea is not to just, take that and turn that into a visual of that, but to understand what's the meaning inside that. And fortune cookies are really great in that way because they're a little open-ended, right?
Right,
A
right.
good fortune cookie is not going to tell you tomorrow, you're going to find a $20 bill at the corner of, Fifth and Vine, all right?
Right.
It gives you a lot of ambiguity, and I think that's important in art too, is to be able to express the essence of it. To give them problems like that, I think, is a good way to begin teaching. Then to get them to get up in front of a group of their peers and explain at the point of sketches, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. So to have them sort of walk through the same process I would go through.
Pitch. Yeah. I think when you word it that way, when you think of all the factors that, first of all, you have to separate the professionals from the hobbyists.
Right.
And you're going to have a certain number that like, oh, I like to paint, I think I'll take this class and it's just fun. No.
Right.
And then you're going to get the truly brilliant artist, but they lack business skills, and they lack those. So when you get down and you get down to the very end of it, wow, the odds feel so stacked against people.
Right.
To turn it into a profession. And yeah.
That's also one of the things that I do, because I think, I'm certainly not a born businessman. I think it is a learned skill set. So with my students, I would have them invoice me for each assignment and do, it's just sort of side things, teach them certain things about, to think of becoming a professional artist is a little bit like opening a shoe store. I mean, it sounds very crass and brutal when you say it that way, but that's what it, in a lot of ways, you have to understand those dynamics in order to create a structure for yourself that allows you to be able to be creative. It allows you, for example, to be able to say no when a project is not right for you creatively. Right. And that's all about being able to know that your rent can be paid, and all the practical aspects of life are not going to, the wheels aren't going to come off of, because you're being true to who you are as an artist. So yeah, that requires those skills that art schools really hate to talk about.
Right.
I think it's a huge disservice to artists to do that. You give them all this training to be creative and tell them that they, about their freedoms, and then you don't give them any practical way of applying that in the world. And it's not surprising that a lot of people feel frustrated at the end of that process.
Oh, it's a balance. It's a navigation, right? You can compromise on some things, but you got to know where that line ends. I mean, if you think back, it's such a luxury to get where you are in where you can say no, where you can say, because people live these freelance lives are not free. you like,
I have the world's worst boss, me.
Right. And like, you can't, if you turn something down, chances are that you go to the back of the line in the Rolodex for that next. And if you think about how art has evolved, I mean, Michelangelo had a patron, you had patronage.
Oh, yeah.
You had very wealthy people.
There are letters from Michelangelo to the Pope complaining about fees and not getting paid on time and working conditions.
Right.
As I say, I'm not a fan of the word illustration, mostly because I love the art form, but I think people don't understand it. But I also say this to students in particular all the time. If you walk into a museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Louvre, you are walking into a space where 95% of what's on the wall is illustration for all practical purposes. It was a specifically assigned problem with a time frame and a space. People weren't sitting in their studio looking at a blank surface and saying, what do I want to do today? They had a specific problem to solve in a specific way in a specific amount of time. And I think that is the tradition of art. And I think, that's an important thing to understand. And then to understand, how do I do something that's what's so marvelous about seeing a Michelangelo or is to see, wow, within that framework, this space exists so much room for creativity and brilliance if you allow it. And yet that's something you have to allow yourself, and you have to also fight for.
Yeah, you can't throw out your left brain. You're going to need it. You know, you're going to absolutely need to dig. And if you're an introvert, sorry, you know,
Yeah.
you have to go face first into the world. And but I think all of that conflict, all of that sort of discomfort does become fuel. Like it does transfer, I think, over to something that's more evocative and and powerful, that creates that connection.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's your again, I think I'm you know, I think it would be terrible if I felt differently, but I think I'm a much better artist at this point in my life than I was at 20.
Oh yeah.
And it's not just because I've been doing it for a long time and each day go through the craft side, but it's also because I've lived a life. Yeah. And I have a lot more to say and a lot more understanding, a lot more experience, good and bad, you know, painful things that everyone goes through in life are then filtered through into what you have to say. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things about doing a creative thing like writing or painting or making music, is that if you're living your life, you've got so much more, which is the actual point. That's the connection point with anyone who responds to what you're doing, is you're talking about life, right? You're talking about something that everybody has experienced in some way or has some connection to.
And it's got to be cathartic. I mean, you can process it in some. I mean, of course, yeah, if you're very limited by the project, but you can get some of that out.
As I say, I think that if there was a one piece of advice I would give to any, you know, a young creative, would be that it's really in the picking and being thoughtful about the kinds of things, not just that you take on, but the kinds of things that you put out into the world, that to show people, to be proactive, to make work for yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
Then people are going to, you're going to show them the direction that you are right for and what you're not right for. You know,
right.
Come to me and say, can you paint me a Pepsi Cola can? That's not what I do. Right. Just, like I say, I'm not going to make a map, you know, because that's just not. I love people who can do beautiful things. I respect all kinds of working, but by defining your voice and what it is, what you bring to the world, you already have allowed yourself much more opportunity to have that cathartic experience with every project that comes your way. Like I say, go to Michelangelo, go back and look at all those pieces in the museum with that in your head.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things were commissioned. And then you start to really appreciate what it is to work in that space and to do it in a genuine way.
Yeah, I got to say, I was super mad when I saw that your illustrated man was sold out from Folio Society.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted that. I'm like, wait, what? When I was on your page, I'm like, oh, but
Dante's Inferno is also sold out, and so it's a nice thing too. But
oh yeah, no, it's got to be great. Was that Easton Press or who?
That was Easton Press.
Yeah.
And I say I have before me the next two parts of the Divine Comedy to Purgatory and Paradise.
That's awesome. Yeah, and to think, yes, it has to start somewhere. It either has to start with a personal prompt or a client work, but it's all, you know, it's all wonderful that exists, which brings me to today. What do you think about AI? Are you familiar with what's going on with AI?
I actually am not only familiar with it, but just within the last week, in a sort of a coalition with some other artists. So I've been very proactive and in sort of the arts field when it comes to these kinds of issues. About 20 years ago, I was involved with the copyright issue, which was a very important one for artists too at the time, and raising awareness. Built a conference, an international conference that was now it has existed since then. Every 2 years, the illustration conference. It's around the world. 500 people gather and discuss artists' rights issues and other creative issues. So the AI has been very much on our radar, and so we released a letter and wrote to a lot of arts organizations, and there are various exhibition competitions and annuals, and contacted the main groups as a group of about 16 of us, I think, sort of more prominent names in the field, and to ask what their position was on artificial imagery, and to express our concerns about it. Because my position is, while it's an interesting technical advance, it is in the end something that relies on scraping the data or the history and the copyright and the art.
Interesting.
Almost just the legal side of it, but what they can't make. It's a machine that can't make images without taking everybody else's images and matching them together. And so it's inherently
Stealing.
Theft.
Yeah. I hadn't considered that. I thought mostly of some, again, the type of person who says, I want this and this is all I want, and don't bring me any of your editorial BS. I just want this. And when you strip the humanity and soul out of a piece of art, you get an image, but it's not necessarily art. So I was worried about that aspect. I hadn't even considered that in some way you're informing the beast, who is then regurgitating something.
And there are a lot of images, for example, where people are generating, and they're not just saying, I want a seascape with a dragon or I don't know, whatever you can imagine, but they're saying in the style of.
Yeah.
And so you're getting it, because otherwise you might get just a photographic result. People want art, and they're getting art by giving very specific stylistic prompts. It may not be an artist's name, but it's a way of creating art. And so what this machine is doing is scraping essentially the imagery of people who have. I mean, what is style if not the sort of a beautiful expression of the individuality of human beings? If you look at I don't know, like any artist that you can imagine, let's just say a Picasso, you're looking at a very specific way of seeing the world. It's not photographic. It's an interpretation. A neck may be very long. The eyes may be wider apart than they would be in real life. These are all interpretations with a specific meaning or purpose or drive from the artist. It's their voice. And for a machine to just go out there and steal that voice and mash it together with enough other voices that it might not look like it came from them, I think there's just something unethical as well as obviously inhuman about that.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
I can also appreciate that it's a fun toy to play with if you're not an artist, to say, oh, and I want to make a picture.
Yeah.
And I always thought about this. And I can't afford to buy a picture, or I don't want to, I want to be able to make something. It's a fun toy, but I think it's a dangerous thing. And I think people should really think about what the consequences of that are.
It's funny, because I approached it as, the same way, a fun toy, but I was like terrified of what it means, because when the people enter that information, they're also providing data to this beast. And so when I thought about that, what's the harm in just playing around with it? But knowing it is scraping the vocabulary, the visual vocabulary that's been established by people's hard work, it is piracy. And then when I worked in marketing, and I would write a radio spot, and I would go to hire voice talent, you could not, and I'd hear all these auditions, and I'd say, like, I want a 50-year-old woman sounds like this, and I could not say I want someone who sounds like Jane Fonda, or I can't say like.
And you actually know why you weren't able to do that? There was a very specific
Oh
loss.
yeah, there's SAG.
I think there was a Taco Bell commercial years ago in which the creative agency specifically said, we want a Tom Waits voice. Tom
Oh
Waits was able to sue them,
yeah,
get a huge settlement, because you are actually, it is your intellectual property. It is your identity has been
Right.
stolen from you
right.
for some purpose. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really important to say those are legal arguments.
Right.
And there's a lot of people, I respect the idea that, I have a lot of friends who are collage artists, and for example, for them, they feel like, and arguably even in my work, I'm influenced by this genre of Flemish painting, and so
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
using that language to say other things. We all stand on the shoulders of giants in some way as creatives, but I think this is different. This is inherently different, and it's really an ethical issue, but it's a going back to that comparison of sort of stealing the soul in a photograph or something. That I think you're stealing the soul, the humanity of art, in that process.
Yeah.
And in a way that can be really specifically defined too.
Yeah, if you're entering the search criteria, if I say, write me the next Stephen King novel, and AI goes through his library and figures out his style and writes a 300-page book, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, I just went through the experiment on my channel, and I had an AI write a script for a YouTube video, and never would have known. It's a well thought out argument, and it's my whole point was how chilling it is. You can't outsource humanity, and the fact that you can get close to it, where you can create this imitation of life.
It's terrifying.
Yeah,
it really is. And I had a friend who made the comparison and said that it's sort of it's like man versus man with a machine, and I said, well, I actually think that it's man versus man with a machine with the other man's art. It's worse than that, because it's but it is terrifying to think in all kinds. I'm sure you've seen this. There's some Tom Cruise. Have you seen that? The artificial intelligence Tom Cruise?
Yep.
An actor who looks a little bit like him and can fake his voice, and then they mapped Tom Cruise's actual face on it, and it's incredible. You look at it, and there's just no way that's not Tom Cruise, but it's not Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
that's where all this technology is going, and at a certain point, we have to ask ourselves, not just with art making, but with all aspects of this, what's happening here, and are we able to do things that maybe we shouldn't do?
I think that in some regards, the genie's out of the bottle, and you get to a point where there was this old phrase I heard: believe none of what you hear, only half of what you see.
Yes.
And we're getting to a point where you can't believe any of it. And yeah, those deep fakes, they used to be labeled deep fake, so everybody's like, oh, it's just for fun. And then after a while, I saw a couple that didn't have it, and I'm like, wait, is that Tom Cruise? Or
yes. Right.
And to think that, I mean, if anybody has a case for a lawsuit, it would be him, because he's been oddly targeted.
Yeah. I mean, it's we live in a world that's already sort of post-truthy, and so I think this question of where we fit in, where I mean, if something as individual as art can be put in a machine, and then what is our existence all about here, right?
Yeah. No, that's true, because I always looked at art and the expression of art to be the pinnacle I mean, yes, buildings and technology and all the things that prolong our lifespans, yes, are very, very important. But the result, that's the, food, clothing, and shelter. And that's all part of what keeps us safe. And what is the output of that? It is art. It is this thing that cannot be. That's why I was fascinated by how you could teach a thing like that, because to me, that is just a human crying out in some way, reaching out in some way. That
to circle back to that, I think that's a really, really the hardest thing, but also the most beautiful thing to watch. And it's the thing that's sort of out of your hands. Is what you're trying to do is teach somebody to find their own voice.
Right.
And there are ways in which you can challenge them, if you want to make the direct metaphor. I mean, you give someone a sheet of music to sing, to learn the range, right? But what they want to sing and what they want to say with their music is ultimately theirs to find. And your job is another sort of analogy would be, if you maybe want to be a professional weightlifter and somebody else wants to be a professional golfer, but art school is like a gym where we all do push-ups and get in shape and learn how to control our bodies so that the thing that we then want to do, we can do with more precision.
Yeah, more so than what do you want people to see is what do you want people to think? Or not even that, because I think that's unfair. That gets back to the thing, like it is what are you trying to say? And even if you never tell anybody what you're trying to say, you got to at least know what that was at first.
I think so. I mean, I think even if what you're going to do is create something that's it is an intuitive process. For example, to do an abstract painting might be just really responding to shapes that you put down and then reacting to those. It's not necessarily an intellectual or in a traditionally defined intellectual process, but it's very much a mental mind process, and it's about learning. It's about practice, and it's about learning to be able to hit the target that you want to hit. Right. So that takes just basics, eye-hand coordination and skills. But then it's about doing it enough and thinking, what do I want to hit? And that's up to you. That's the thinking part. That's not about me saying you're going to solve this problem, but here's a problem. How would you solve it? That's a big difference.
Well, I cannot wait to read the Magus. And the first time I do, it'll be with your art, which I've already seen, but I'm thrilled to have that chance. I think part of what makes Suntup editions so great is, of course, they do try to pair every book with an artist that matches the tone or matches the frequency, the wavelength. And it's also the materials, of course, that tactile experience that you can't get from an e-reader, all those things that make it an elevated experience. So I'm really looking forward to it. I appreciate you taking the time today to talk about it. Super interesting. I was a little afraid to ask the AI question because it scares me, but I think it's something that I think we all have to start to think about.
I think it's maybe the most important development for musicians, for writers, for visual artists, but more importantly for the people who love and appreciate music and writing and art, to understand that this is not magic.
No,
it's just the opposite of that.
It is. Because I think the discussion is incredible. I don't think I've ever talked to somebody who taught these things and who understands that, you have to be a business.
Honestly, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. I love the questions that you ask, because the questions are really the things that, I think in art school, you have a lot of people who come and speak and you see people, and some people speak from the mountaintop and it's, impressive and amazing in its way, but you never understand how they got to the mountaintop. And I think it's really important to talk about you know, and I think teaching teaches you that too, that this is something that it can be explained in some ways, and the parts that can't be explained are the beautiful thing, right?
So true. Yeah, I think, and I love that point, because since it is all about human connection, it's connecting with human ideas, it's about expressing humanity. Connecting with the students is also connecting with yourself, and you see yourself, you see, wow, I didn't think I could, that was a great way to phrase it. I didn't plan on saying that. And it crystallized in that moment because of the space. And
Makes you a better communicator, and I think also makes you ultimately a better artist too, when you have some awareness of what, you know, on some higher level or some verbal level of what you're doing. Certainly it makes it easier, for example, when you're sending sketches to a client and talking about the direction you're going to take something, to know that you can actually put a sentence together and describe something that's not inherently verbal.
Right. And I think that is definitely something you can't get until you've had a lot of experience trying to, like, I could imagine some artists are like, this is what I'm trying to say, like, point to the art, like, just let that talk to you. And it's like, unfortunately, that can be where you end up, but it's not where.
But that's where ultimately that piece of art will do its best, and what you do best. But there's that process of getting there, and that's really about sort of bringing people along on that journey and saying it's not done yet, but this is what it is, and this is where it's going, and this is why. And then I think that's really helpful for a lot of people to take you on that. Let's say it's our job as writers, as musicians, as painters, as even as architects, is you're bringing people into a space with a particular purpose, and you have to understand that and sort of bring them along, and then let them have that experience.
Well, this will stand as a masterclass, I think, and really appreciate you taking the time today. This is a great chat. I love doing these because it is about the human connection and understanding these things, and it helps me become a better visual thinker too.
Yeah,
so
I think, as I say, anytime you talk about it with other people, you're understanding your own way of thinking a little bit better, and getting ideas from other people about how to think.
Well, thank you. And
thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll see you in the group.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.